So hi everyone, today I'm with Mark Dannis. So Mark is a seasoned insurance executive with a strong expertise in technology, and I would say people as well. Mark was a global COO and Europe's CEO of Munich Re's Digital Partners, and Mark will tell us more about what this organization was about. And what Mark did is build InsurTech ecosystem. He's probably one of the early stage InsurTech ecosystem builders of our, I would not say our century, but of the way InsurTech came into the market in the UK and across Europe. Mark left recently Munich Re Digital Partners, which was reintegrated within the Munich Re group. And today, Mark works with various numbers of young ventures to help them scale and become bigger businesses. So thank you very much for joining me today, Mark.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. That was quite the welcome, by the way. And you sort of referenced my multiple job titles, which I look back now and think that sounded a bit silly, really. But yes, I was responsible for a fair amount at Digital Partners.
Yeah.
Should I give a bit more background to what we did? That'd be helpful.
Yes, please. I would love to hear from you about who you are, actually, sure. Who you are, what you love doing, because that will help us understand why Digital Partners and what you do every day today.
Let me give you a very whistle-stop tour of my career. It's nearly 30 years old now, I suppose, in terms of how long I've been working. It makes me feel old actually saying that, Sabine, but there you go. So I started out in software, believe it or not. I joined a software company on graduating. They happened to build insurance platforms. So I'm one of those people, you know, you get two types of people in insurance, really, don't you? You get the career insurance people who've always wanted to be an underwriter or an actuary or something like that, and they've kind of planned it all out. Or you get everybody else who kind of fell into insurance one way or another and then never managed to escape, and that I'm in the latter group. So I worked for this software company for a number of years in different roles, and I kind of, you know, emerged as this fairly senior project manager, I guess. And then I did a piece, sort of patch in my career of consulting, I guess like a lot of people, some freelance work along the way. And then I happened upon a contract that was in a Munich Re business, and that was my, you know, doorway into the Munich Re group 12 and a bit, nearly 13 years ago. So I joined the group back in, I think it was 2009, something like that. Again, seems like quite a long time ago. And my main focus at that time was running business change. So I was, like I said, a kind of, you know, if I was describing my profession, it would be a sort of project specialist. I've done every role on projects, from testing all the way through to program sponsor. So I've done every kind of layer of jobs on projects. I'm a kind of project guy by trade, I suppose you'd say. And I was running large parts of business change in the group. One of my internal customers is a guy called Andy Rear, who you'll know, and I guess a lot of your listeners will know the name for sure, probably met him as well. I heard him at conferences. He was working on an idea. This is back end of 2015. He was one of my big internal customers, running a big part of Munich Re's life reinsurance business. So nothing really to do with InsurTech, nothing to do with P&C either. But he had met our good friends, bought by many, sort of through a mutual connection, and asked me to help him out with what he was calling a business plan, an idea. It wasn't really more than a scratch of sort of thinking on a bit of a beer mat, you know, that kind of level of a business plan. So I helped him work on this idea. And then in the early part of 2016, we took that idea to the main board of Munich Re and got essentially full backing to build a business around this InsurTech engagement model. So it kind of emerged from just as, you know, a sideline really from our day jobs. And then it's one of those things, Sabine, where you, one minute you're working in a particular capacity, and then the next minute it's like, okay, you have to drop everything because we've got this new thing and you have to do that immediately. So it was, you know, it wasn't really engineered at all. It was something that just kind of emerged, and it was a combination of a good idea with Steve and the guys at Bought by Many, and good timing. And, you know, we launched this business, and that's the start of 2016 with just the two of us. And when I left just recently we were more than 100 people. So, it's really scaled quite fast, and it's even in Munich Re terms, it's a reasonably large size business. So yeah, quite proud as I look back, as I sit here, and I'm not really coasting into retirement. We'll come on to that in a bit, but as I look back, I'm quite proud of what we achieved in 5 years, actually.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. 5 years, and I know the numbers. So it's it became a multi-million dollar initiative. And what is interesting as well is you're mentioning Steve and Guy from Bought by Many. I talked to Steve a few weeks ago, actually, about him building a growth business. So it's nice to actually talk to you about 2016 and when InsurTech started. So technology ventures focused on insurance, and how you brought about a new business to drive transformation in our industry. So tell us a little bit more about your journey. I mean, it's a transformation journey, a digital transformation journey, which is quite unique when you look at the business premise you started with.
Well, the key for us at that time was to get the backing of our board. I mentioned that we went with it was more than a beer mat by that point. We had, put maybe 4 pages together of a business case for doing this. But the main achievement we had there was to get full backing of our board. So our board member fully supported what we were trying to do, and by that I mean that we were entitled to experiment slightly using the group's balance sheet, right? So, we could also bring in the resources that we need. Like I mentioned, we grew from 2 to over 100 people. So, we invested, or Munich Re invested in this idea quite substantially. For me, the reason that it really worked well was we had that kind of blended model. So we offered the like a one-stop shop, really, a toolkit of all the things an InsurTech in particular might need. Latterly, we've worked with not just InsurTechs, but other sort of distribution, which I'll come on to. But so we could offer everything, obviously, that you'd expect: insurance capacity and kind of product and pricing expertise. But we could also offer, some technology solutions, data solutions. We had compliance people. We had the backing of the group in terms of, sort of risk and data analytics and all of that. So we could bring the weight of the group with kind of in a nimble unit, so we had the best of both worlds. And then we had a kind of sibling offering through Munich Re Ventures, so we could also invest at the same time, provide capital to the, so investment capital to these businesses as well as risk capital. So literally they could pick from the toolkit of the things that they wanted. And, obviously if you're Stephen and Guy at Bought by Many, you don't want to have to go around multiple partners for all of the things you need. You want to focus on building your business. And if you could find the kind of one preferred partner, I think that model worked really well. And it doesn't suit everybody because, you have varying degrees of capability in-house, and maybe you prefer to do more as an InsurTech versus, the insurer doing it. But for many of our partners, it worked really well because we could flex that model up and down. So for example, on the investment side, in the end, we partnered with maybe 25 or 30 InsurTechs in my time, probably more than that actually. And we invested in less than half. So we're quite selective about, where the capital went, and actually some of them didn't require money at that time, so it wasn't a necessity. But I think the examples where we've got it really right are probably where we've blended that well. So Bought by Many is a very good example of that, as is Next Insurance in the US, and these are almost household names. I suppose I would being a bit bold by saying that because it's insurance and it's InsurTech, but almost household names in our world, aren't they? So, and they were, funny enough, the first 2 that we actually worked with in early 2016. So I think we did something right in our early partner selection and what that offering was to them.
Absolutely. And I remember seeing the announcement around how you were selecting those ventures. I also remember Andrew being on stage and talking about the pillars of technology, capacity provision, investment, and I think the last pillar was around design, product development, making sure that the 2 entities could collaborate. So there were 4 main pillars, right, as part of how an InsurTech or tech ventures relevant for the group would be evaluated.
Yeah, that's right. And again, it changed a bit over time. So in the early couple of years, we were probably slightly more invested in technology, and our sort of assertion at the time was that we ought to offer all of the tech as well, so the full tech stack of policy admin. Actually, we sort of middle of that 5-year period, we looked at the market, the landscape, and thought actually there are people out there who can do this a lot better than us. There were hundreds of policy admin vendors who you could pick if you chose to buy rather than build. So we pivoted that model a bit away from building everything to having this kind of network of providers. I'm gonna say ecosystem. It's like, we know it's overused, but actually genuinely that is what it was. There was a kind of network, if you like, of best-in-class providers that we could connect with our InsurTech partners and vice versa, and let them get on with it rather than us having to provide everything. So latterly, we focus more around data infrastructure actually, and collaborating with our InsurTech partners to leverage some kind of data advantage actually. So that was where we focused sort of towards the end, or that's where the focus is now actually.
I think for our listeners, it would be great if you could define what digital partners meant and means, because you also are using the word ecosystem. And I do think that you were probably one of the early stage ecosystem builders in 2016. There has been different business models looking at corporates wanting to collaborate with growth ventures. But the way you went about it, you mentioned, 30 ventures and even more. And I'm sure for you to select 30 ventures, you had to scout and evaluate hundreds, like I have had to. So tell us a little bit more how this works and how the names came about.
I'll start with the name actually. So we literally made that up, sat around a table trying to figure out what we should be called. And it does sound like we threw a few sort of keywords up in the air and they landed, but the key for me there is around the partnership. We wanted to be a partnership business, fueled by, if you like, by Munich Re, but certainly to the side a little bit. So it's all driven by partnerships, and we try to treat all of those InsurTech relationships as partnerships, and try not to make them too transactional. And you can get a bit hung up, I think, on alignment of interest. We hear the phrase a lot, don't we? And it's folly really to seek perfect alignment. I think you have to figure out what everybody gets from the partnership, and it will vary over time and it moves around a bit. But as long as everybody feels like there's some kind of upside, so it's not a zero-sum game, if you like, then that's in a good shape. Sort of seeking perfection is, is nonsense really. So in order to sort of get the funnel, I'll give you some metrics. So we met way more than 1,000 startups over the years. And thankfully, I didn't have to meet all of them on my own, but we had people scouting in US and Europe and all over the world, actually. And in the early days, of course, there wasn't that much competition. So, we would, it's almost no exaggeration, a slight metaphor, but they would kind of queue around the corner to come in and work with us, as you can imagine. And probably without knowing it at the time, we did build that first InsurTech ecosystem, actually. Never really thought about it. Again, it wasn't one of those things by design. It was just how it kind of emerged. So that 1,000 or more, narrows quite quickly in the funnel to the ideas that you think are good. And we had various sort of almost scientific processes of assessing partnerships. But in the end, it boils down to a few key questions, right? Is the team the right team? Are they strong? Are they balanced? And I'm sure you've had the same. I've seen many pitches where there's, generally the entrepreneur and maybe the tech person, and then that's about it, and then perhaps not that well funded, and they don't really know much about insurance, but they're trying to disrupt the industry, and they're almost being deliberately provocative. And then you've got the other extreme where you've got people who've come out of the industry and kind of really know the pain points and have thought it through perhaps a bit. And there's a lot in the middle. So it's not enough, in my view, it's not enough to have a great idea, because there's lots of great ideas. You have to be able to execute. You have to understand the space you're disrupting. You have to disrupt in what I would describe as a positive, method of disruption or mode of disruption. So don't come in and just kind of upset the apple cart, because, ultimately in this ecosystem, you do rely on your insurance partner, probably more than you realize as an InsurTech, actually. I think maybe you've seen this over the years. I think in the early stage of InsurTech in 16, 17, it was slightly more of a confrontational / defensive environment, wasn't it? Whereas actually, in the last few years, it's much more collaborative. I think there was some fear and apprehension
I think
about
probably some lesson as well from fintech. Mark, I think when you compare the two, there were much more disruption coming into fintech and financial services with payment platform. And at the early stage, I think some of the InsurTech, because it takes time to transform an industry, took a much more aggressive approach. And as you said, gradually realized collaboration is actually probably very important because of the regulator and legislation.
Yeah, and you have to kind of respect that your insurance partner, so the carrier or whoever's providing you capacity, needs to get something out of this. It becomes a question of horizon. How soon, how much patience do they have, and that varies, of course. We know that, but you have to kind of respect that they also need to show some value here. Some value creation on the insurance side. So it's no good burning the book just because you want to disrupt. So, and actually, funnily enough, now I'm working, more on the InsurTech side of things. I'm working with 3 or 4 like you mentioned at the top, helping a couple scale and helping a couple of entrepreneurs with brand new ideas. And I'm always very mindful that this needs to be positioned in a way that is collaborative in its essence. So if you like, going back to the partnership, description of digital partners, it has to work in a partnership. And so ultimately we were selecting people that we thought would be good partners. It's a bit like a marriage, I guess. You have to, everyone brings something to the party, and you have to make sure it's kind of, some sort of harmony there. But that funnel went from 1,000 down to, say, well, I said 25 or 30. It's probably 50 that we worked with in one capacity or another. But it's, it narrows down quite quickly.
I'm sure. Yes, I'm sure it narrows down quite quickly. And the points you made around synergy and being able to get on with one another, like in a marriage, I think those are very important points. Have you seen amongst your partners, your digital partners, some of them collaborating with one another? Because when I started, the accelerator, I was always saying to my corporate partners, the insurers I was working with, that, what would make such a difference is all those younger ventures accepting that they can't solve everything and starting working together through API potentially to solve bigger problems for the corporates they wanted to serve. Have you seen that happen within your portfolio?
Not so much within the portfolio. The thing that we have done a bit in the past actually is host things like round tables with various discussion topics that were of common interest. So we would bring people together to talk about something about like embedded insurance or something. I'm going to throw buzzwords in there, right? But we were tended to be the facilitator of those discussions with our InsurTech friends, if you like. But there's not that much evidence of any that are sort of collaborating that closely together to solve a problem. What they will do is use each other's services perhaps to solve their own problem. The early stages of InsurTech, a lot of the propositions were around really just a better product and better customer journey and slightly easier access to that customer. And more recently, of course, it's been much more joined up, if you like. So we're using alternate data sources and getting into the complexity of deeper analytics and machine learning and so on, bigger data sets, and so there's a lot of what we now call InsurTechs who are on the kind of back end of the process, if I can call it that, the data and technology more than customer journey and insurance product at the front. So that you're finding InsurTechs joining together in that sense, aren't you, where they're providing services to each other effectively.
Do you see a change in the positioning of the insurance company? You mentioned earlier that as you started, you were far more concentrated on the technology aspect of the proposition. And then you said, well, you know what, why build when you can actually buy? And so selecting the latter option, but you also mentioned data and mastering an understanding of data. Do you see a shift happening in our industry around, that importance of data? We hear data is the oil of, the most important things of everything. Did you see that happen as you built digital partners?
My theory is that insurance has always been data driven, right? Always, even from 400 years ago, or let's go 4,000 years ago, Phoenician traders or whatever, they're always, figuring stuff out based on some kind of data points, aren't they? When's the safest time to sail across that ocean and deliver your goods or whatever. So, there's always it's always been a data-driven industry, if you like. I think now we have the benefit of technology that allows us to process a lot more data, right? And everybody's trying to capture data points and try and get some kind of data advantage. I think sometimes we don't exactly know what we're doing. We're capturing data without having necessarily a clear purpose. And so maybe in that sense, it's at an early stage of that journey where we can actually genuinely use technology to process huge data sets and draw insights. And actually, by the way, this is a common theme you'll have heard already, not just to sort of repair and replace, if you like, in the old style of insurance, but much more around, risk prevention and prediction, so being more predictive to avoid or mitigate risk. And so, prevention rather than cure, if you like. And a lot of insurers now are moving their models towards that, aren't they? So they're, becoming more of a force for good. Actually, I've always thought of insurance as quite a force for good. It gets a bit of a, probably needs a bit of a PR exercise, doesn't it? Because if you think about it, nothing really happens, on a commercial sense without insurance being in place. I did a keynote a couple of years ago for an event and talked about, there's that Beatles song, A Day in the Life, right? And I was sort of thinking about the guy gets out of bed or rolls out of bed or whatever, puts a comb across his head. And I won't do the rest of the lyrics, and I certainly won't sing. But I was trying to think of the journey of me getting up in the morning to getting to that conference to speak, and all of the sort of touch points with insurance that maybe you don't notice, and it's absolutely fundamental. So, maybe we're at that point where we're collecting those data points in advance of me making that journey and figuring out that don't get that train, get the next train, and, avoid that route in your Uber, and, that building's a good building or not a good building. So I think we're starting to sort of use data for more, and insurance more for a force for good. I just don't think it kind of gets the credit it deserves, maybe. I never thought I'd become this evangelist, by the way, for insurance, right? But maybe that's what I am in the end.
Well, we've been in the industry for so long that we can see the opportunity and some of the challenges. But I think today with, COP26 and all this conversation around sustainability, there's potentially an opportunity for insurance to be back to that, that good, this social good it's supposed to do. To support people and businesses out there. I'd like to go back, Mark, to another point you made earlier. You and Andrew and the team, your leadership team at Digital Partners, build a business with 100 people, and you started with 2 people. So tell us how that has been to move from a small team to a big team and making the business be something that MunichRe is proud of today.
I mean, for me, it's relatively straightforward, because I always think, you're careful in who you hire, right? But you hire good people, you empower them, and then you trust them, and you don't really need to check anybody's homework. If you've got the right people in place, you don't need to check their homework so much. And I think where people get it wrong is where they kind of hire people and then, they kind of feel like they're managing those people. And actually, I'd look at it the other way around. My job as a senior leader in Digital Partners, or DP as we called it, was to create the environment and the space for people to be the best that they can be, right? And my job was to remove obstacles and give them the fuel to do their job and kind of get out of the way of it a little bit, really. And so I hired some fantastic people both from within the group and from outside the group. And we have this really good blend of that, mix of people, mostly or lots from the insurance industry, but not everybody, some from tech companies and from completely different backgrounds, actually. So we have this lovely blend. You'll be pleased to know, by the way, half of my leadership was female, just because they happen to be the best people for the job. It wasn't there's no kind of engineering there. It just, it turns out, women are really good at stuff as well as men being really good at stuff, right? So,
and it both, right?
Yeah, there you go. So, but it was just, happy coincidence if you like, but very young team generally, so really enthusiastic. But they, they don't need that. I don't need to supervise people. You hire the right people, and like I said, empower them, trust them, let them get on with it. And your job then is to be the support. So you're sort of in the background more than anything. And a little bit, I think that was the approach that Munich Re took with us as a business. We were a fledgling business, two guys who weren't really experts in InsurTech or even P&C business really, but we were given that kind of free rein to, within a few parameters, but not too many. Actually, in the earlier years, it was more just get on and try, see what you can do. Don't go crazy, don't do anything to damage the reputation of the group, but try and create this innovation footprint for the Munich Re group in the market. And we definitely did that. We kind of, in my view, put Munich Re on the map for innovation actually through DP, and the way we conducted ourselves. We were sort of, I think, dealt fairly with everybody that we dealt with. I've said it a few times now, but we built partnerships, and there's a bit of give and a bit of take, but you have to, they were respectful partnerships, and that was, for me, was why it was successful. But ultimately that's down to the people that we hired and the people that we work with in the InsurTech businesses. Everyone kind of, everyone had sort of different drivers, but it always generally felt like we were pulling in the same direction, even if we weren't agreeing on everything. So yeah, but the team thing is, for me, I don't think it's easy, but I'm describing it like it's kind of easy. It ought to be straightforward, right?
It should be. Can you share with us an experience which has been the most memorable experience for you, positive one, and one which is potentially the less good, but from which you've learned a lot during the course of the past 5 years?
The most memorable was probably, if I look back, and I haven't had that, so I kind of left in the summer and then stayed on a bit longer, but, because I was helpful and all that, and haven't really had a chance to take stock. But I think for me, that whole period, really, that 5 years from 2016 to the end of 20, maybe the last year was bad because of COVID and all that. It wasn't a great year for many people, but certainly that first 3 or 4 years of DP was the best part of my entire career. I absolutely loved it. And I won't pretend that I, woke up on Monday morning and didn't realize it was Monday morning, like some people say, I knew it was Monday, but it never felt like a Monday, never felt like that feeling when Sunday evening you think, oh crikey, the next thing that's going to happen is Monday morning. I'm dreading it. I never ever had that once with DP. It was, absolutely loved it. So I think when I get a moment to sort of stop and look back, I probably sit there with some pride of what we did and what we built, and the people that we developed. If I look at some of them now, that some I'm working with now actually on some separate ideas. They've left Munich Re as well, and we're working on a few startup ideas, and I see how these kind of young enthusiastic people have grown into really credible kind of insurance business people, entrepreneurs, and they're the next wave of InsurTechs will be coming through some of these guys. So that makes me so proud to be a part of their journey. The hard bits, I think, along the way are when partnerships don't work out. We've had a handful of InsurTechs who, for one reason or another, haven't got the traction they need or haven't been well funded enough, and so so eventually things don't end well, and that is difficult because my job is to protect Munich Re's balance sheet to some extent, right? But equally, I look at these people who've probably put a lot on the line, and it is entirely stressful, isn't it, for these guys to try and carry their business when maybe it's not going in the right direction. So a lot of admiration and sometimes a lot of, well, certainly empathy, but a lot of sympathy for these guys when they hit the wall, and you can see it in their eyes, can't you, sometimes how stressful it is. So not every idea is going to be successful. That's the reality of it. But yeah, it is hard to see things fail, I suppose. Not a big fan of failure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you look at, sometimes you wonder whether part of InsurTech or, having a startup or the tech startups, whether there is a part of it which is luck, question mark. But you already have mentioned some key characteristic of successful businesses, right? How to build a sustainable, successful venture, such as a team and the execution acumen. Could you give us a little list of what you think are some of the big criteria when you look at those companies you are working with? What do they have today? to be where they are, and what do they need to do? Because you are a scale expert, what do they need to do to move to the next stage? What are the top 4 or 5 items you've seen?
The thing for us was always, there's lots of good, I probably mentioned it earlier, there's lots of good ideas. It's whether the team can execute on the idea, and whether the team itself is strong enough and well balanced to do that. So can they deliver? Then in order to deliver, have they got the fuel for the business? So are they well enough funded that they're not going to come into, they're not going to reach a point where they're going to run out of runway and then they're struggling and they're only 2/3 through. So also I suppose alongside that, do they allocate their capital well? So are they, for example, are they building the right tech where there's some value add there, or are they buying something to save themselves time or whatever? Then, of course, it comes down to who they're selling to and how they're selling. So ultimately, you can build a brilliant product, brilliant journey. You can be well funded. You can have a great team, great idea. But if you don't have a customer, if no one's buying it, then it's kind of pointless, right? So, our big acid test really was distribution. How are you getting to a customer? This is the customer that everybody else is trying to sell to, by the way. So, what's your edge here? What can you tell me that I believe that gives you that edge over somebody else? And they're basically, let's be realistic, these things have never really changed that much over time, have they? But it's a kind of combination of all of it that gives them a chance of success. And then I suppose the secret sauce is whether they've got either some edge or some kind of additional drive or determination that other people don't do. So they're going to keep going. They are going to deliver no matter what. And you kind of know when you meet people that they'll deliver stuff, whether that happens to be an InsurTech solution, or something in a completely separate industry. Some people have just got that drive and determination, and you can almost see it inside them, actually. Scaling slightly different. I think, I'm working at a number of businesses now whose the front end of their businesses are growing really fast. So they've managed to get that. They've answered those questions. They had a great idea. They found a space in the market. They found a means to reach a customer. So the front end, top line, let's say, is growing fast. And typically the sort of back end of the business, so the back office, as we used to call it in the old days, I'm old fashioned, right, is struggling to keep up. It's kind of, they've got no processes in place, and they've got no, they can't scale. So things are done on a kind of goodwill, best endeavors basis, because that's how it was when they were 10 people. And they want to grow to 100 people like we did at DP. And so you have to have that kind of business infrastructure kind of trying to catch up as quickly as it can with the front end of the business that's growing rapidly. And of course, investors love that the front end of your business is growing rapidly. So there's no way you're going to let that slow down, obviously. So you have to find a way, creatively, to get the back end to kind of catch up a little bit. And that is a challenge. I mean, it's good because that's where I'm focusing some of my attention now, to give me a sort of meaningful purpose for the coming months.
That's super cool, actually, to be able to help those businesses now realign the front and the back in some ways, making sure that the back can actually fulfill the need of the front, the sales commitment, the marketing, and all the great promises they've made to their partners, and I assume to their customers as well. Wanted to ask you now around, corporate venturing. And I want to ask you that question from the lens of a tech ventures wanting to work with corporates. As you highlighted earlier, working for some startups like Bought by Many, working with Munich Re Digital Partners was really key to their growth, like many of some of the unicorns we have out there. Next Insurance being another one. What should a growth venture look for when they look at partnering with a corporate venturist and take money, support, capacity from that company to succeed?
I think you have to pick a partner based on values, probably. Are they kind of motivated by the same thing? Do they have a similar time horizon for you? Because if you've got a venture funded business, right? So venture capital funded business, that's pouring a lot of fuel on, in some cases, fast moving vehicle, right? So it's just going to get faster and faster. And so you need your kind of corporate partner, whichever guise they're in, but let's say they're, potentially an insurance carrier, you need them to be somewhat aligned with you in terms of time horizon, what they find is important, their kind of appetite for experimentation, all of that stuff. Because what you don't want is to get some way down the line and then have a surprise because you realize you're completely misaligned. Now, I mentioned earlier, there's no point pretending that we can ever have this perfect alignment of interest, because it's just, I don't think it exists probably. But there is the sort of sweet spot in the middle where everybody feels like they're kind of winning a bit, right? And so you have to kind of constantly work at that. And like I said, it's a bit like a marriage where there's give and there's take, and you compromise and you find the space in the middle where everybody's happy, right? And so it is it's a partnership model. So if I were an InsurTech looking for a corporate partner, I would try and align with somebody that kind of respected what I brought to the party, but I also equally, in return, I reciprocate and respect. They have, lords and masters who are expecting them to take care of balance sheets and, ultimately the P&L of their business as well. And so I have to kind of respect that. So, I feel like I'm repeating myself a bit on the partnership model, but that's what I would look for, kind of a faithful partner, if I can describe it like that.
Yeah, on one side, you said, you have to have that self-confidence, determination. I think it's about consciousness of knowing where one is going and being relentless at delivering against commitments. On the other side, it's not just about taking money, it's also about making sure that it's smart money and there is clear alignment on both sides of the equation, because then you are, as you mentioned again, is about thinking about a marriage. It's as if you're marrying different people in some ways, because often you don't always have one single CVC or investors. You often have many on the map, but it's about finding the one which are best fit to achieve the growth potential. I would like to go.
You ruined the metaphor doesn't work now. You've just, because you're marrying multiple people at the same time, but let's
no, we need to be careful about that one. So I wanted to ask you about your last words of wisdom, but the way I would love for you to answer that question is by looking at Mark in 10 to 20 years from now and looking at your younger self. What would you tell that person as an entrepreneur, someone who built businesses as well, and today are enabling the growth ventures of tomorrow?
Well, for me, if I were looking back at myself, I'm a kind of very purpose and value driven person. So what I want now is or what I fear the most probably is not leaving some kind of positive legacy, making a difference somewhere. So if I'm looking back in 20 years' time, I would say to myself, always maintain your integrity, keep true to your values, be kind to people, be helpful. And actually, if you follow those kind of sort of key principles, if you like, or core principles, in theory, then you will leave a positive legacy. So for me, it's key that I kind of, the people that I work with share values with me, and I can build a business that I think is a good business and operates in the way that I think is, sensible or good, clear, transparent, treats its employees well, treats its partners well, all that kind of stuff. And by the way, I would, instill the same principles in my own children. I would expect them to operate in that way, and hopefully I set a good example for them as well as my business partners. So it's all about, for me, it's all about kind of leaving making this positive impact, whether that be helping a business grow in the right way or developing people that become the next sort of wave of entrepreneurs, or they employ the next group of people and enable them to be really great at what they do. And so I know it sounds all a bit kind of noble, but that's if I'm looking back, and by the way, 20 years is a long way off. I'm not sure I'm going to make it, Sabine, but let's say 10 years. That's what I would say to myself. I think, did you do the right thing in the right way, and did you make a difference?
I think I hear that a lot, actually, Mark, from a lot of people who have, for some reason, at some point of their career, realized that they've done a lot, but today it's about giving back and making sure there's congruence and alignment with purpose. So thank you very much for your time. I'm super grateful, Mark. So
pleasure. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, Sabine.
We are with Mark Dannis. Mark today is, I guess, an entrepreneur. He's one of our insurance executives who is there to help our ecosystem grow better. And if we want to reach out to you, Mark, where should people go?
LinkedIn's generally the best bet. I will certainly respond to every kind of genuine request. And like you say, if I can help people in our world, like I said, I'm this insurance evangelist without really trying to be that. But if I can help in any small way, I will, whether that's connecting people or more in depth, helping them scale their businesses or fix problems. So, that's my kind of, my job now is to help people a bit.
Cool. Well, thank you. And I will remember that, I have my portfolio.
Oh, no.
So I will say, you need to talk to Mark. So thank you.
Take care. See you.
Bye.